and that's equally dangerous. So today what I have for you is some secrets to solving problems as a team. And then in the second session, I'm going to talk to you about what to do when your team is stuck. I'm really excited about the second session too, though, because there are 10 activities that you can take back and do with your team today. I mean, right away, they're so easy, you can do them. So I'm going to have 10 activities for you with lessons I've learned about doing these activities and help for you, for your team, like moving them forward to get the best performance you can get. Just a little qualifier, and that's why I put this on the first slide, is just to tell you that we have been referring to and will continue to refer to the 5 behaviors of a cohesive team model, which comes from the 5 dysfunctions of a team from Patrick Lencioni. And as you can see, I'm an authorized partner. I'm an accredited facilitator. I'm licensed in this program. So I just, want to clear anyone who's going, oh my gosh, she's using Patrick Lencioni's stuff. No, I'm licensed to use that. It's all okay. So I will be referring to that. You're familiar with the model. If you've been in some of the other sessions, and if you have, good job, because having a certificate that shows you've done this series, it is a big career booster. It means a lot today, so good for you. But this is the model, in case you haven't seen it, the 5 behaviors of a cohesive team. And what Lencioni tells us, just briefly, because I know we've done this in other sessions, if you're coming back to sessions, you're starting to get some repetition and starting to hear some things over and over. That's how we learn, so that's good. That's part of in-depth content. It begins with trust, and you can see in this triangular model, this pyramid, trust is at the bottom and it's the widest because everything has to start with trust. And that's why we did an entire session on trust, how to build trust on your team, because the model tells us that until you can trust one another on your team, you can't really have conflict, productive conflict. And we did a session on that last week where we learned about how to have conflict on our team that's productive, conflict that will help us to move forward instead of, that bad negative kind of conflict. This is productive conflict. What we learned was, and this is where we're going to go today even more, once we are able to have open debate, productive conflict, then we have a better chance of getting commitment. And that's what we're going to be talking about a lot today, getting commitment from everyone on the team so that we can move forward with achieving the results that we desire. And of course, if we get commitment from people on the team, then accountability is easier, because we've all agreed, we've all committed to this outcome. So accountability is easy. It's easier for us to hold each other accountable, which of course takes us to results, which that's what it's all about, right? Trying to get those great results and achieve those goals that we so much want to achieve. So what I'm going to be talking about a lot here is how to solve problems, including your team. And let's just start with this, because as I've said a few times in other sessions, I think sometimes a problem with a team that's not working well is the attitude of the leader. So if you're a leader, I'm sorry, we have to hear this though. Leaders sometimes feel like they're solely accountable, and they're not. When we have a team, the very definition of a team is that we're mutually accountable for results. And you have all these people on your team that likely you hired or you agreed for them to be on your team. They have talents and skills that you should be proud of, that you've been developing, that you've been working on. And then when it comes time for the team meeting, it's too hard. You don't want to involve all those people. You just have to make a decision. You have to move forward. That's a mistake. Ken Blanchard said to us, none of us is as smart as all of us. And boy, isn't that the truth. So why do we want to carry the burden of solving a problem alone as a leader? That's nuts. That was probably one of the best days in my career. That one day in my career that turned things around for me was when I became so desperate. And this is the true story. I was so desperate that I had a white flag meeting with my team to tell them that I surrendered. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to solve this. I was working for the government, and we had been given a new order, a new road, a new path we had to follow that was so absolutely ridiculous and made no sense at all. And we had to do it because in one place in the great state of Florida, this had gone wrong, and therefore we must all change. You can relate, right? But what they were asking us to do was insane. Like I was crushed by it, because I was like, I don't, people are going to die when they hear this. They're just going to walk out the door. Like, I don't know what to do. I was so exasperated that I put a white napkin on a pencil, and I went into my team and I said, okay, here's what's happening. I'm telling you, I don't know what to do. I surrender. And you won't believe the reaction. It was amazing, because that surrender from me, that vulnerability, clicked for them. And they were like, don't worry, we can fix this. We can do this. Let's talk about what we're going to do. And that team, inside an hour, came up with all kinds of ways to deal with that issue and to solve that problem. And I left that meeting going, what is wrong with me? Why did I think that I should shoulder this? I have all these people who have the ability, who are great, who can do this, and I'm trying to shoulder this alone. No wonder my team's not performing to the level that I think they should be performing. I'm trying to do it by myself. That was a big day for me. And I don't know if you've had a day like that, but it's a big realization that you're carrying the burden, and you don't have to. When you're leading a team, you want those people to be involved. We know that engagement is increased when we involve them in solving problems, when we involve them in the process of the team. We get collaboration, communication, we get more diverse solutions, which is great. Sometimes blind spots become visible, things that I had not thought of at all because I was so exasperated. It seems so obvious when they talked about it, but I couldn't see it. So blind spots sometimes become really visible. Here was a big one. It wasn't me making them do anything. They all bought into the solutions we discussed. So buy-in came from everyone who was going to be responsible for changing this course of action. It wasn't me telling you have to do this. It was everybody figuring out a way to do it. So buy-in and commitment were very high when you include everyone. And you know how I said trust is so important in that pyramid? This is a sure way to build trust, when everybody knows they're going to be a part of the solution, not a part of the problem. So including the team is really, really important process in getting the great results from the team that you want to get from achieving those goals. Now, sometimes we make assumptions as leaders, so don't make this mistake. Don't assume that team members don't have enough knowledge to help solve problems. They do. They have knowledge you haven't even tapped into. You hired them for their skills and abilities. Use them. Don't assume there's not enough time to get everyone involved. Here's the thing. If you don't take time now to get everyone involved, you're going to spend time in unproductive ways that are going to end up hurting you in many, many ways. So spend the time up front to get them involved. And don't assume that team members won't be interested. Believe me, they're interested. They want to be part of what you're doing. They want to be part of that solution. They're interested. If you don't give them the chance to participate, that builds resentment. They resent what you're doing to them, what you're making them do. So make them a part of the process. So how do we do this? The right solution is teamwork to get that team involved. But how do we get it right? How do we involve our team in making decisions that are the best possible decisions? Well, I was thinking about how to break this out for you. And I think most of us have heard of the traditional model of problem solving. And really, that's what we're doing here. We're solving a problem. And if you've done any work or research on problem solving methods, there's a 4-step model, a 5-step model, a 6-step model, a 7-step model, an 8-step model. There's all kinds out there. But I just kind of choose this. This is a 7-step model. Here's what I like about this and why I chose this, because when I look at these 7 steps, this could essentially be the agenda for a problem-solving team meeting. This could be your agenda. This could be your outline for how to do the meeting. First, we got to define the problem. We're going to talk about all these things. We got to specify solution requirements. What does it look like when we have the right solution? Generate the alternative solutions, not blamestorming, but brainstorming, Jennifer. I have strangely mixed feelings about blamestorming. Anyway, analyzing the consequences of each alternative, then selecting the most likely alternative, implementing and evaluating. And here's how I'm going to do it today. Instead of going through all 7 of those, I'm going to say, let's figure out how to queue this up. How do we queue this up? How do we solve a problem as a team? How do we queue it up? CUE. So we're going to talk about 3 steps. First is to clarify what exactly is the problem we need to solve. Now, if you look over on the left of this slide, you'll see they match. Number 1, see how that's written in red? In the traditional model, my clarify step is defining the problem and specifying solution requirements. You see that? Number 2 is in orange, unravel. How do we find the right decision? That's generating solution alternatives, analyzing consequences, and selecting the most likely. And then number 3 is to execute. What's next? And as you can see, the blue over on the traditional model is to implement and evaluate. So that's how I'm going to present it today to help you kind of remember it. Let's queue it up, clarify it, unravel it, and then do it, execute, okay? So help, clarify, unravel, execute. That's kind of our roadmap for today. So far, so good. Yeah, all right. So let's start with clarify. This is defining the problem and specifying the solution requirements. And the first thing we have to do is we have to figure out what is the problem that we're trying to solve. Honestly, how can we expect to get good decisions if we're not absolutely clear on what the problem is that warrants this decision? As well, it's up to us as leaders, and this is happening before we even meet with the team. We have to know what the problem is. We have to go in having some understanding of what our expectation is for fixing this. So we have to define those parameters up front too, to make sure that we even understand what a good solution will look like, and what are the roadblocks that we can't touch. We need to tell the team we have this problem, but we have $0. We can't bring budget into this. There is no budget. Or we have to tell the team that we have this new policy we have to enact. It's the law. There's no option. We have to do it. So I have to define those parameters for my team in this stage and clarifying what the problem is, right? I love this from Albert Einstein. And this is what we need to know as leaders before we go in. If I only had 1 hour to save the world, you probably heard this, I would spend 55 minutes defining a problem and only 5 minutes finding the solution. And this is what happens to us many times when we're trying to solve problems as a team, is we haven't taken time to really clarify it. And no one's really sure what we're even asking. And we walk out with a bad solution because we weren't crystal clear in the beginning on what the problem is. So as you're thinking about this, as you're working to get this ready to take to the team, think about these things. The first thing is, how will you clearly explain your thoughts? You're going to have to explain your thoughts to your team. You're going to have to tell them why this was so devastating to me, why I came in with a white flag. I have to be clear with them about what I'm thinking and what my reasoning is. People want to understand where you're coming from. What facts and information can you provide? Here's the policy. This is all I know. And I don't know what to do with it, except that I know we can't break the law. We have to do it. What's the outcome you need? We have to find a way to implement this within 60 days. So for you, whatever the problem is, these are questions to ask yourself in advance, so that when you go into that problem solving meeting with your team, you can make sure it's very, very clear. Think about this. How will things be when your problem is solved? If you can get this in your head before you go, how will it look? You don't have to figure out how to get there. Your team's going to do that. But what are you trying to get to? What is it that you want? What's the result going to feel like for you if you guys accomplish this, if you solve this problem? What will it look like, sound like? Whatever you can do to help you be very specific about what the solution will entail. And why do you want to achieve this result? Why is it important? Because believe me, your staff wants to know why. You're going to have to answer that question, why? Why do we even have to do this? So you have to be very clear about that going in. One thing that I recommend to you is when you go in for this first step, to clarify with your team, take a few minutes to structure your message. Make sure that you've clarified what the message is going to be so that you can go in and be consistent in your message and be very clear. So what I suggest is this. First, you define your purpose in less than 10 words, like state the problem, right? Then you have your talking points. And finally, what's next? And I recommend like doing this on an index card or on your notepad, whatever, on your computer, wherever you want, however you want to do it. But I suggest that you take a few minutes to write it out and think about it. And here's why. Because when you don't, it's easy to get it mixed up. And I've told this story before, but this is why I'm a big fan. I had this situation where I went into I had 15 teams that were under my supervision. I was on all 15 teams, and I went in with a message, but I presented A, B, and C talking points in different order to different teams. There was mass confusion because people assumed that A, B, and C were priorities, and that A was most important, B was second, and C was third. And I had teams that were in conflict because they had different priorities because I hadn't presented them in the same order. Now, I know that sounds kind of like, really? But think about it. It happens all the time. So we want to be consistent with our message. And if we take a minute to do this, it'll help us to make sure that we're presenting it consistently the same way every time. The other thing that's very helpful when you do this, and I know I'm asking a lot for you to take something and write it out, because a lot of us have that ability to form it in our head, I know. But what happens is when you start to write it out, you start to think about what questions they're going to have when you bring this up. And that's very helpful because that gives you time to prepare for those questions that you've already figured they're going to come at you. So let me give you an example. Let's say that the problem is that we have job openings and we can't get people to apply for the jobs. Okay, so the purpose, I'm going to have a team meeting, and the purpose is going to be to develop a strategy for recruiting applicants for our team. So the purpose of today's meeting is to develop a strategy for recruiting applicants for our team. Right now, we have 0 applicants in our pool, and the position has been announced. Talking point A. We can't offer a salary above the standard base for the position. Off the table. Talking point B. We need someone as soon as possible. Talking point C. What's next? Let's make sure we understand the problem. Then we'll brainstorm some ideas for solving it. Our goal is to leave this meeting with a strategy that we can immediately implement to get applicants in our pool. So there's an example. So you can see how starting your meeting with that, making it very clear, sets you up for the next step, which is to help you start generating solutions for the problem, right? So clarity. Taking time to consider how things will be when the right decision in place is critical. Structured messages ensure your message is organized, thought out, and consistent. And sharing your thoughts and your reasoning will help you in gaining trust, which we know is very important, and commitment needed to move forward. Yeah. So this is clarity. So we've done all this up front. We've done our homework. We're ready to go into the team meeting. We're going to make sure that we can present this problem in a clear way. We have our talking points. We know what our constraints are. We're going to share them. We can't go above standard base pay. We have nobody in the pool right now. We share the facts with them. Now we go in and we begin to unravel this. How do we make the right decision? How do we take things apart, examine them, put them back together to make the best decision possible? So this is where we analyze, examine, make our decision. In our problem-solving model, this was generating alternative solutions, analyzing consequences of each alternative, and selecting the most likely alternative. So how do we unravel? So I have a few suggestions for you here. A couple of them, you'll probably raise your eyebrows out like this one. Ground rules. What does this have to do with anything? Well, remember last week we talked about, productive conflict. What does it look like when we have productive conflict? What are the rules around it? I think it's always really important, and you'll hear me repeat this from time to time, because I don't think that we take time to establish ground rules in our team meetings because we just all assume everybody knows how to act. But the fact is, maybe we've never done this. So we should have a team discussion about the rules and principles that govern the way that this meeting is going to be held. What if I disagree? How should I go about expressing that? What if somebody doesn't speak up? Do we all agree that we're going to say, Devin, you haven't said a word. What are you thinking? Do we all agree to do that? How's the meeting going to be? How are we going to make decisions? I mean, let's take some time up front to talk about the ground rules. And then we're probably going to have to reinforce these. How much time are we going to spend on this? We've only scheduled an hour. What if we haven't come up with a solution? What do you want to do? Don't wait until in the heat of the moment when the hour's up. Oh, we're not done. What are we going to do? Let's start in the beginning. Let's cover these things. Let's establish some ground rules. And the team needs to set these ground rules together. Why? Because we want them all to commit to it and hold each other accountable for it. So let's set some ground rules. What if my phone rings? What if it's my most important customer? What if I have to go to the bathroom? Should I shut my phone off? What if someone knocks on the door? Are we going to be disturbed? Whatever, the ground rules, whatever you think is important. That's why you ask the team to do it. You ask them to bring it up, what's going to be important. Anytime you hold a meeting, you need ground rules. Now, some teams have an established list of ground rules that they use over and over. That's fine, but you're just going to have to continuously reinforce it. So that's the first thing. I know that's really basic, but it really saves a lot for us in the long run, because people know what's normal and what we expect. Especially today, one of the biggest problems is just these phones that we're carrying. Is it okay for me to look at my text? Is it okay for me to see who's calling? What's okay? Can I check out for a minute, look at my email? We have to talk about it. Make sure that we're involving everyone. And what this means is that we're going to have to call on individuals as a routine practice. Probe when a message is unclear, paraphrase, watch to make sure that no one person is dominating the conversation, especially the leader. Keep an eye out to make sure everyone's engaged. That means that all of us are going to have to take responsibility sometimes for calling someone out who hasn't given their opinion. We have to have everyone involved. It also means you have to be a good facilitator. You're going to have to facilitate. If you see someone pick up their device and start to look at it, what are you going to do? If you've agreed as a ground rule that that's not okay, then John, I see is something going on? Because I see you're looking at your phone, because we all agree we weren't going to do that, right? I mean, you're going to have to facilitate. You're going to have to make sure that everybody is participating, that everyone's engaged. It takes a little work, it does. I won't kid you about that. Sometimes you have to summarize points and just keep things moving. So facilitate the process, be a good facilitator. Sometimes I see teams actually assign roles, which isn't a bad idea. I've seen teams assign a dissenter. Shannon, no matter what somebody says, and it all sounds positive, I want you to think of the negative and throw it in there. Sometimes they'll appoint someone to be the facilitator that's not the leader. That's not a bad idea. So just ideas for you, but we have to control the flow of conversation. We have to watch for transitions to the next topic, make sure that we're summarizing, moving in the right direction. Make sure that we're summarizing at the end of the meeting. We're going to do a whole session on meetings. I think it's next week. So we'll talk more about that at meetings. Another important thing about facilitating, an idea about facilitating that I want to throw out to you is the idea of breaking into groups. And I throw this out to you because what I find is that when I go to conferences or, when I'm in a training session, it's very common for us to break into small groups. If you're on a Zoom call, the breakout rooms. But for some reason, leaders of team meetings don't think about maybe stopping and breaking out their team into groups for a discussion. Like before you say, okay, we have this problem. Our problem is we got to get people on our applicant pool ASAP. We need ideas. Let's break into groups for 5 minutes, just talk to each other about it. And then we're going to come back and do a large group brainstorm. Why do we do that? Because sometimes it's a lot easier for me to talk to one person than it is to 10. So if we have them break out, I do this all the time in team meetings because I'll ask a question, nobody speaks up, nobody says a word. And my standard response is, hey, it's okay. If you don't want to talk to me, let's talk to each other. I want you to find one other person in the room, talk about this for 5 minutes, then come back and we'll talk as a large group. It never fails me. It never fails me. Sometimes people just need to to talk in a smaller group to be comfortable. You have a team of 9, break them into two groups of 3, just break them into little groups and try out. Just a tip for facilitation. It works great for me every time. So you have to facilitate, right? And you have to lay the groundwork. Lay the groundwork, explain your conclusions so far through your structured messaging, using your structured message, where we are, where we're going, just keep the group moving in the right direction. And then of course, there's the whole brainstorming thing. Let the storm begin. Brainstorming is awesome. It does kind of need to be done right. And I know a lot of us have had instruction on brainstorming, but I think I would be amiss if I didn't just spend a minute on brainstorming, because remember, conflict, debate that is focused on concepts and ideas and avoids mean-spirited personal attacks. Sometimes brainstorming turns into mean-spirited personal attacks. That's a stupid idea. We can't do that, and even if you don't verbalize it, sometimes we're thinking it. So let's talk about how brainstorming should work. It should be this: free-flowing ideas, no judgment, no criticism, and you shouldn't allow it. Remember, you're facilitating this, so you shouldn't allow it. This is not the time for criticism. This is not the time for somebody to say, and how would that work? This is just a free flow time for people to throw out crazy, wild ideas. No discussion, no killer phrases like, we tried that 5 years ago, right? And you should encourage people to piggyback on other ideas. It's okay if Jennifer suggested this, for you to take that up a step and suggest something similar. That's okay. See, we cover all the same ground and all the ideas are recorded. So, keep that list going of all the ideas. So brainstorming should be really energetic, productive time when people are just allowed to give out any ideas that they have. And just watch out for those killer phrases, because it'll kill your brainstorming. It's not in the budget. We don't do things that way. We tried that before. This will never work, right? None of that should be happening during your free flow brainstorming session. We have to work too to move brainstorming up a level. One of the mistakes we make with brainstorming is we do this brainstorm and we're done. One thing you should do is think about how to move it up a level, how to break free from these thoughts and now build onto the thoughts beyond what you came up with just in the first 5 minutes. I don't know if I'm saying that well, but what I'm talking about is this. There's phases of brainstorming. And in the first one, you're just blurting out ideas that are close to the surface. You're just getting the surface stuff. The second phase, a whole new level of ideas. And finally, where did that come from? So what does this look like? Well, this is taking breaks. That's one of the things that we could do to improve our brainstorming, taking breaks between brainstorming levels. And the reason I say that is because we know that 50% of the population in the United States are made up of people who have a personality that is more reflective. They sometimes need a little time to think about things before they'll blurt something out. And if you can give them, a 5-minute break or a 15-minute break and then come back and do another round of brainstorming, they'll have a whole different level of thinking and all kinds of new ideas that they didn't think about in the heat of the moment. And just giving that break when people go out. I mean, how many times have you done that? You leave the room and 10 minutes later, you're like, why didn't we think of that? So just maybe give a little break between brainstorming levels. Think about how to turn the problem upside down. You need to increase sales, talk about how to decrease sales. You need job applicants. Think of all the ways, let's brainstorm about all the ways that we can discourage people from applying for our jobs. And you can see what starts to happen as people brainstorm ways to discourage, which is against everything they believe. But if they think about how do we discourage people, what comes from that is ideas about how to encourage people to apply for jobs, right? Here's a little activity that you can do. I call it the paperclip activity. You give everybody a paperclip. This is a fun activity for your team just to see how this works. And tell them to list all the ideas they can think of for how they can use a paperclip, and give them a time limit. Okay, then stop them. And now ask them to make a second list of all the things you cannot do with a paperclip. all the things that you cannot use a paperclip for. And what they start to see is, as they're thinking of the things that they can't use it for, but wait, I really could use it for that. And they start adding to their list of what they can do instead of what they can't. It's really a very effective exercise, because as they start to think about, we can't use paperclip for this, we can't use it for this, they say, oh, wait, but I could use it for that. They have to move it back over to the other list. You see how that can work? Upside down, turning it upside down. It makes people think in a whole different direction. Consider the uniqueness of this problem. Some of the best ideas have come from problems that people have already solved in other organizations, in other ways. You probably heard about like the Post-it notes. Do you know how Post-it notes were done, how they were invented? It was a church choir, and they were trying to put paper in place to hold their place in their hymnals. And one of the choir members said, hey, I work for 3M and we've been working on this, sticky glue. What if I could find something that was unsticky? What if I could stick this thing and then peel it off? Goes back to 3M. Voila, we have Post-it notes. The Jim Dyson, who invented the Dyson vacuum cleaner, he saw this cyclonic separator that removed dust from the air. And he said, ooh, I wonder if I could do that, and make something like a vacuum cleaner, which he did. All kinds of crazy ideas like that. So maybe look at some other organizations who have come up with crazy solutions that seem crazy at the time that might help generate better ideas for you. And another thing that you can try, I love this one, is generate a list of never suggestions. Okay, we need to get people our applicant pool, but we could never offer more money. We could never accept people who don't have a college degree, but we could never accept people with a minimum amount of experience. Make this list of nevers. And what starts to happen is, well, what if we actually did do this? I mean, is this really a never? Because sometimes what we find is the things that we have locked in our mind that are nevers, we could never do this, are actually not nevers. And we don't consider them because we have locked in our mind that we could never do this. You see what I'm saying? So again, it takes your brainstorming to a whole new level of thinking. And that's what we want to accomplish. And when you're doing this, think about this, groupthink. And we've talked about groupthink before. But when people fail to voice their disagreement, a lot of times they'll sit in a meeting and just nod their heads and say, yeah, that's fine. You can't allow that to happen. Groupthink happens when everyone agrees to it just because they're ready to get out of there. They don't want to disagree. They don't want to be the one person who says, I don't like that idea, or I'm not sure that'll work. And so everybody nods their head. And that's not what we want to accomplish. So you've got to watch out for groupthink when you're doing these kind of things. And just a side here, you can use decision-making tools. There's a lot of them. I know probably some of you are really familiar with them. There's the input, output analysis, Pareto analysis. There's all kinds. Here's a whole list of different kinds of things. Obviously, in this workshop today, I'm not going to be able to go through all of these different things, but I bet you use these or some of these. And this might be a great list of things to look into if you're interested in this, because these are things that might help you in decision making. There's a lot of great tools out there. If you have anybody in your group who's been through black belt, blue belt, or has that kind of training, check in with them. Maybe they have some ideas for you. Make sure you analyze the consequences as we continue to unravel this. Ask what blocks would there be for this alternative once you have some alternatives out there. What blocks would there be? Now you want to consider that. Ask dumb questions like, what are the legal implications of this solution? What will the solution look like in maybe 2 years, 5, if we go through with this? What will happen if it fails? What will happen if it totally blows up? How's our timing on this? Is this the right time for this? So before you put that final solution into place, take some time to analyze the consequences of how that might look. And then you're ready to make that final decision. What is the best choice? And in making the decision, I have a couple of recommendations for you. It really comes down to this. You either get consensus, you vote, and there are a few other methods. So let me run you through this when you're making a decision. Now, at this point, you've brainstormed, you've got all of these possible choices up there. You're really starting to focus on one or two of the best alternatives, maybe three of the best alternatives. You're trying to figure out the best alternatives, and you're going to figure out, what are we going to do? How are we going to go forward? And the first thing is to come to consensus. And I talk about consensus because I think a lot of people have a misunderstanding about what consensus is. Everyone agrees to support the decision of the team, which is different from everyone agreeing to support the decision, right? Everyone agreeing with the decision. It's very rare for us to be able to get everyone to agree with the decision. So this is everyone agreeing to support the decision of the team. This is the decision we've made. Can you support it? It's possible that we can vote, all right, we're going to vote, and majority rules. Thing to be careful with here is what defines majority. I mean, what if you have a team of 9 and 2 members are out? Can a team of 7 vote on it and it passes? Or are there not enough people there? So you can do majority rules, but remember, define what majority is. Other methods, sometimes the leader just has to decide. Sometimes from the alternatives, the leader listens to everything everybody has to say, and then they say, okay, I've heard what you said. This is good. This is what we're going to do. Sometimes it has to happen that way. Face it, there are times when you just have to make the right decision. Another method I really like is multi-voting, and I'll talk about that in just a second. Let me just talk about consensus for a minute, because I want to make sure you know how to do this. Everyone agrees to support a team decision. Not everyone agrees, right? So consensus, here's how you do it. You have to test it. You review your final choice. So now we're down to this is what we want to do. You summarize agreements. This is our choice. This is what we said we're going to do. Everyone on board with this. Final thoughts. Anybody have any final thoughts before we leave the room and choose this as our choice? And then what you have to do is go around the room, one person at a time, and say these words or something very similar. John, this is what we've agreed to do. When we leave this room today, will you support this decision going forward? And watch to see what happens. If John rolls his eyes, stop and let John voice his objections. You'll either find out that he's thought of something that we didn't think of before and we need to reevaluate, or at least you'll know that he has objections. But we have to get John to agree that he's going to support this once he leaves the room. Every now and then you might have somebody who says, I know this is what we're going to do. I hear you, but I can't get on board with this. Wouldn't you rather know that right now? And that's when the team leader has to say, I've heard you, John. I appreciate your opinion. Everyone else in this room has agreed to support this. We're going to move forward. And now we all know we're going to have to watch for John, because we're going to have to help him come on board. Or maybe John's just not in the right place, but at least we know that we have an issue, and that's good to know. So make sure that you're testing consensus. The other method I talked about was multi-voting. I love this. I would suggest that you look this up, that you Google this, because this is really a great technique for you to use in your team. Briefly, how it works is this. After you've brainstormed and you have this list of ideas and you're trying to come up with the one that you're going to take forward, you have each member of the team vote for a specified number. So let's say we're trying to decide where we're going to go to lunch. And I say, where do y'all want to go to lunch? And we have 20 ideas up there on the board of where we can go to lunch. So what I do is say, all right, here's some Post-it paper. I need each person to go up here on the list and post your paper on your top 3 choices. Now you can't do all 3. You can't put your notes on one, all 3 notes on one. You have to, vote for just 3 ideas, right? So they put it up on their top 3, and then you look at what you have left. You can narrow down your list tremendously right there, because when you take the top ones that were voted for as the top 3 over and over, and now you might need to do another round of multi-voting. Maybe that reduced our choices to 8. Let's do it again. And now we have the most popular choice. And then we can begin our consensus process. So if look this up if you're doing an important team meeting where you're making a decision. This is a really great technique. And also it works well because it's anonymous. You know, I'm so busy voting for my top 3 that I pay no attention to what Kristen's doing. Kristen's voting for her top 3. I'm not like, oh, well, that's what Kristen thinks. I don't even know what she thinks because I'm busy taking care of voting for my top 3, right? So it's a really great technique because it turns out to be anonymous. And it's a lot easier for me to go along with the group when I know that as a group, this is what we decided. You know, this wasn't pushed by one person. The whole group decided this. So I really like it for that reason. Okay, and now we have to get to executing. This is like, you know, the Deming model, plan, do, check, act, right? Where we get the actual execution, improve, plan, implement, evaluate. You know, we need an action plan. Yes, we're going to have an action plan. How do we implement the solution? What do we do? What are we going to do going forward? I'm going to show you a really simple action plan example. And it can be this simple, just to in the short term, to move forward in your decision. It can be this simple. It has to be done at the end of the meeting, so we know exactly what's going to happen, where we're going to go next. Here's our action plan from this meeting. John has agreed to do a draft post for announcing our opening that we would use on LinkedIn, because that's what we decided we wanted to focus on. So John has 1 week to get that to us. He's going to draft this post for announcing our opening to put on LinkedIn by 5/16. Mary volunteered to check in with HR regarding social media recruitment policy, just to make sure we don't step on any toes, because we want to do this on LinkedIn. And Chris, he says, you know, I've been really interested in doing work on LinkedIn. I'll research it and I'll report back on exactly how it would work. And he'll have it for us by the next meeting, which is 5/20. So now we have specific assignments. We know exactly who's going to do what. We've all agreed that we're going to post our job on LinkedIn to try to get applicants as quickly as possible. And everybody is participating in the process, and we know exactly what's going to happen. What's going to happen on 5/16 is I'm going to be going to John and saying, John, I didn't get that post that you were going to do. I wanted to see that draft and I'm really excited to see it. Where is it? Peer accountability, see? John was there. We were all there. John can't get upset. Yeah, I'll have it for you in an hour. You know, so everybody is on board with what's happening. We've got commitment. Isn't that great? Commitment. Yeah. And of course, then there's the evaluation phase, which we can't ignore. You know, once we've solved the problem, is it working? Are the requirements being met? Remember, we were very careful about clarifying what requirements had to be in place when we did this. What are the results of monitoring that we're doing? And how does this problem solving group see their solution? How do they see the progress? How's it working? Do we need to tweak it? What's happening? And stakeholder surveys, if you have those, of course, what does that reveal? How's it looking? How many applicants did we get in that first week after we posted it on LinkedIn, right? We can go back and look at it and evaluate our results. And so that's cue it up. Clarify, what is the problem we need to solve? Unravel it, how do we find that right decision? And execute, what's next? Whew, I feel like I've been talking for an hour, Jennifer. Let me stop and see anything anybody would like to talk about. Encourage participation, boost engagement, and contribute to building cohesive teams, just like the little activity we just did with the chalk dot. And I'm not sure what you saw when you looked at it. But when I talk about doing activities, I'm not really talking about fun and games so much, although some of these things are fun and they are kind of game-ish, which, you know, that could be cool. But what I'm really talking about is doing the work of the team. Doing the work of the team while incorporating effective problem-solving techniques that will resolve better outcomes. That's what we're really looking at. So this is going to be kind of fun, though, the way I set this up. At least I think it's kind of fun because I have 10 activity ideas for you. And as I tell you about the activity ideas, I'm going to tell you about the lessons that I've learned in doing these activities that maybe you can learn from taking forward. So 10 activity ideas and 10 lessons learned that will help you to do some activities with your team that will get you unstuck and help you to really produce better results. Now, these are activities that you can do, and I want you to know this is important. There's no special equipment required. There's no money involved, no need to do a budget request. They're not physically challenging. And I'll tell you why that's important to me. Some of these things that you see on the screen, you hear about these, the trust fall and all that kind of stuff. What I've learned is that's risky. It's very risky to do those things. A couple of examples for me that have really changed the way I do activities. Probably the biggest mess up I ever did. And this is great. Let me start by telling you a way I screwed up. I had this group of people and they were all men. So, that's just the fact. They were all men. And these were men who went into large factories and were responsible for repairing turbine generators. They were maintenance men. Turbine generators, these huge generators that power cities, in these huge plants and organizations. And I was supposed to be doing a session with them on teams, helping them to work together as a team. These are people that do not sit at a desk all day. These are people that do not sit in a chair all day. These are people that go and work in these factories and these huge plants and are used to being active all the time. So I'm thinking, I can't have them sit behind this desk all day, behind these tables and just talk to them. That's never going to work. I'm going to get probably booed out of here, right? So I came up with this great plan. I had all these activities to help them learn the lessons that we needed to learn. And they were all outside. And we're in Florida. So the weather was nice. Weather wasn't really a factor. So we go outside. I spent hours setting up these activities. And I was so proud. And it went pretty good. Only as we came back in, I learned that they didn't have nearly as much fun as I had. One guy said, "Oh, I hurt my knee. It hurts so bad. That hasn't hurt for 4 years." And I'm like, ugh. Another guy says, he's limping, "I think I sprained my ankle." And I'm like, are you guys kidding me? I mean, this was nothing that challenging. Okay, there was a rope that they had to step over. They had to figure out how to get everybody over this rope, but it was a team activity, like it wasn't a big deal. There were just these little things. It didn't turn out great. And even months after I did it, this guy was still complaining about his knee. I felt horrible about that. And the lesson I learned was, all these great fun activities, I spent so much time researching games. It's not for everybody. It doesn't work for every audience. So I scaled back my games and activities after that. I had a really simple one that I tried at the next workshop. It was, I cut rope and I put it in a circle. And the mission was for the team to do a problem-solving session on how to solve this problem. They had this very limited size circle, and they had to figure out how to put the feet of all team members inside the circle. And whichever team could do that would win this prize, which I think was candy bars or something. So I gave them all the circle. Now, there was no way that the feet of the six team members would fit into that circle if they stood there and tried to put the circle on the rope on the ground and sand in it. It wasn't going to happen. But it was hysterical to watch them try, So this goes on. Finally, they start to figure out the solution to this is sit on the floor. Everybody puts their toes up in a circle, and then you take the rope and you lower it over the toes, right? So now all of the feet are in the circle. So it was great. They had a great time. It was funny. They went through the whole problem-solving process with me and learned how to do that. Everybody's getting up, and it's like, okay, that went pretty well. That was a lot simpler. But there was one person I noticed that wasn't getting up. Everybody's running around talking. Nobody's paying any attention to him. So finally I go over and say, "Hey, did you enjoy that?" And he said, "I can't get up." I said, you can't get up? I can't get up off this floor. I knew I wouldn't be able to. I can't get up. It was very embarrassing. It took several people in the class to help this person get on their feet. It was really uncomfortable. I felt bad for him, and I felt bad for everybody who helped. It was an embarrassing situation, and it ended up taking a lot longer than it should have taken. And all the fun that we had was kind of squelched. So I'm not giving you activities like trust falls where you do different kind of activities, because you have to be really aware of of what's going on. And probably I would say that's the first lesson learned. And there it is. Attention to physical limitations is essential. If you're going to do any kind of activities with your team, know that there may be limitations that you don't even know about, just like those things that I ran into. Should have been a really great experience. And in those situations, it didn't turn out well. So just be careful with the activities that you choose. All right, so here's some activities for you. And number one is to increase trust on the team. And this is called Let's Get to Know Each Other. If you were in on the trust session, you've heard about this, but no harm in repeating, because as I said during the trust session, trust is like the building block of everything for a team. What can we do? And this is the quickest, most effective activity that I've seen done to help boost trust on a team immediately. Let's get to know each other. In a team meeting, each person has to answer these 3 questions. Where did you grow up? How many siblings do you have, and where do you fall in sibling order? And what was an important or unique challenge in your childhood? Let everybody do it. Everybody participates, and then you debrief by asking, what did you learn about your teammates that you didn't already know? This usually results in some laughter and fun. I didn't know that Shannon was, a certified public accountant in another life or whatever, So it's fun. They get a good time with that. And then ask how that might impact the level of trust on the team. Because what you'll get from that and what they'll see is that when they know each other better, trust elevates. Knowing people is one of the basic things that makes us trust people. If you know them, you can forgive them sometimes, you understand them better. Knowing is really important. And we need trust on the team. So I've seen this be very, very impactful. The thing is, it may take a little encouragement to get everybody to participate. Sometimes you'll have to jump in as that facilitator and say, you didn't tell me where you fall in the sibling order. And you may have to ask a follow-up question like, how do you think that impacted you? Being the middle child out of 12. But the important thing is for them to voice kind of what was unique about their childhood. I've seen some people confess some really interesting and deep things. I had one person, I think I shared this story with you before, but probably for me, the most memorable was I had this one person on the team who was a rebel. I mean, he was difficult. He was a very difficult participant the entire time. And we did this activity. And when he talked about a unique challenge of his childhood, we found out that this person's parents had abandoned him like at the age of 11, and he was on his own. And all through high school, he got by sleeping on couches of friends who would let him stay there for a few nights at a time. And he learned that he could depend on no one but himself. You think we have a trust issue there? Yeah. And that was really, really hurting the team. But that was the first time anybody had any understanding of where this was coming from and why he was so difficult. And some attitudes changed. It's like, whoa, now we understand. We understand why you're having trouble trusting us. We understand why you're so difficult. And he actually softened a little bit after that. And I'll be honest with you, in the end, he left the team because he couldn't overcome it. They couldn't overcome it. It was really damaging the team. And just one person who doesn't trust can really damage your team. It's true. So trust. This is the first activity, is trust, starting to build that trust. And the lesson that I learned in this activity over and over again is that sometimes this gets really emotional. And you know what? That's okay. It's okay for people to confess that, they've had a hard childhood, or that they don't trust because they've never had anybody to trust, or whatever. Just be prepared for it, that sometimes things are going to get emotional, and it's okay. There's no reason to panic when that happens. Actually, vulnerability breeds trust, right? Here's another thing. We just talked about this in the last session, establishing ground rules. Believe it or not, this is a great team activity. It builds trust. It helps people to be clear about what we're doing, and it really helps enhance performance. And I think I told you I was pretty good about this before, explaining how to do this, but improving trust, reducing conflict by setting expectations for behavior during meetings. And when you do this, you have the basic rule and principles defined, And it's easier for us to hold each other accountable for that. And the thing I said about ground rules before that I'll say again is that they have to be repeated. You have to carry them through from meeting to meeting to meeting. You don't just do it once and forget it. And when you're talking about ground rules, you're defining your process. So just to be clear, we're talking about participation. How do you expect people to attend your meetings? I love this. People say our team meetings are mandatory. And I say, what happens if somebody doesn't come? Well, they're mandatory. No, what happens if somebody doesn't come? Well, our meetings are mandatory. So everybody comes all the time. Well, no. So what happens? You see where we're going? That's what happens a lot of times. It's like we say they're mandatory, but we don't define what happens if they don't come. What are the expectations here? Like if I miss the meeting, this might be it. It might be that if I have to miss the meeting for some emergency situation, and we define what that is, it's my job to go find a teammate and talk to them about the meeting and see what happened and follow through on it. Or maybe you assign a certain team member who's going to do that, but you have to have some rules around these things. Start and stop times. When are we going to start? When are we going to stop? And when is it okay not to do it? See, here's the thing with start times. Our meeting starts at 9 o'clock, but that's not true. Our meetings actually started at 10 after. Why? Because we never start our meetings on time, right? So if you let the meeting slip, like we do, engage in so small talk, and finally at 9:10, you call the meeting to order, and this happens over and over, people aren't going to come until 9:10 because they don't start till 9:10, even though they're supposed to start at 9. So you have to define that in ground rules with your team. We're going to start at 9. Honestly, I have started meetings at 9 o'clock or whatever time it was when I was the only person in the room. And you know how impactful that is when people start walking in and you're already on item 2 on the agenda? It has a huge impact. The next meeting, they're there at 9 o'clock. So start when you say you're going to start, and stop when you agree you're going to stop. Don't just have an open-ended meeting. This meeting is going to be from 9 to 10. What happens when you do that is that people know we have a limited time and they help you to get through that agenda. Whereas before, we had a lot of free discussion that was unnecessary, and then talk about what's going to happen if we're not done at 10 o'clock. When is it okay to go longer? Or maybe 10 o'clock's not long enough. So define these things up front in your ground rules. In communication, who's going to facilitate? Is the leader going to do it? Are they going to appoint somebody? What's our process for communicating? When are we going to stop and summarize? When are we going to stop and go person to person and check in with them and make sure we have their comments? How are we going to do our problem solving? How are we going to make assignments? How are we going to handle consensus? When are we going to vote? What would that look like? What would be the rules for voting? What would be the majority of majority rules? So all these things that go into holding the team meeting, you actually want to define those as part of the process. This is an activity you can do with your team today. You can go into your team and say, I never really thought about this, but we've never really established ground rules of behavior, how we're going to behave when we have a team meeting. So let's do it. Even if you've been meeting for 10 years, you can do this. Because what you'll find is that hopefully if you've been meeting for 10 years, you have some norms, but are those the norms you really want? So good discussion to have. What are your expectations for your team members? Lesson learned here is it's achieved through activity, that learning that you achieve through these activities, like I said, need to be reinforced. So once you go through the effort to establish these ground rules, you're going to need to continue to use the ground rules and remind people of what those rules are. And sometimes maybe the rules will need to change. The way I see team members doing that most often is they take a piece of flip chart paper when they're defining their ground rules, they write them on the flip chart paper, and they bring them back to the next meeting and put them back up. It can be that simple, however you want to handle it. But you will need to reinforce. Number 3, structured internal networking and social time. The goal here is to increase trust within the team by searching for common ground. And what are we talking about here? We're talking about, those potlucks and those casual meetings and building in time before your meeting starts for people just to talk with each other and say hello, especially if you're doing remote work. If you have people who are working remotely or you're doing virtual meetings, a lot of that, that kind of internal networking gets completely lost because we have no water cooler or lunchroom where we meet in common. So allowing time for that in your virtual meetings, allowing time for people just to get to know each other. One activity that you can do here that's kind of fun, and I don't know if you've ever done one of these, chances are you have, but just like a bingo situation. Have you ever done this for a networking meeting? So, you can go online, and here at the bottom of this, you see myfreebingocards.com. I went online, made this up free. Okay. So the way this is played is team members circle the room, they talk to each other, and they gather signatures. So look at all the information you're getting about people, and you make up these things on the card. I made these up. You make them up. It's completely personalized. Set a time limit, go around the room, talk to everybody you can in 10 minutes and see how many people have done these, put their initials on the spaces, and let's see what we have in common. And then when you debrief, it's great. You go, oh my goodness, out of 10 of us, we all 10 said we have great coworkers. Yay. So just whatever you find that things that people have in common, you learn so much about each other. We're trying to figure out how to trust. We're trying to get to know each other better. So this is an easy way to do it and kind of fun, right? And at the same time, valuable information, and you're building your team. You can do it today, free, myfreebingocards.com, and just make up your own bingo cards. It's really fun. There's actually lots of things you can do like this to customize. If you look online, just go in there, and Google trivia contest, crosswords. I make up my own crosswords. They're all free. I don't pay for it. It's like I can build crosswords based on a training session I've done, or words, important words that I want people to know. A word search, Jeopardy game. It's online. It's free. You can download it. You can play with it and personalize it. Just to give you an example, the trivia thing is one that I do. And I talk to people when I do in-person workshops. I always talk, I use the Ken Blanchard quote that I've said to you over and over again. None of us is as smart as all of us. And when I'm trying to prove the value of a team, what I do is I give each team a trivia sheet, and I have each individual work on it first. You work on it as an individual and you answer as many of the questions as you can. When you're done, you get into a team, and then the team works on it. Never in the thousands of times that I've done this have I ever had an individual do better than a team. None of us is as smart as all of us. And so I use that as an example of the value of teams. This is one of the questions I have. This is usually the first question. If you're ever one of my sessions, now you're going to know the answer. How many animals of each sex did Moses take on the ark? And anybody know the answer? Put it in the chat if you know the answer to this trivia question. Let's see if anybody knows. Oh, I've got no answer. Nobody knows? It's a confusing question, isn't it? Huh. You can't figure out how many animals Moses took on the ark? Anybody ever go to Sunday school? Did your Sunday school teacher tell you that Moses didn't have an ark? Wasn't it Noah? So therefore the answer is none. Moses didn't even have an ark. So yeah, they're tricky.
Perhaps some of those messages came by direct message instead of every one message. But,
So yeah, so I make up all kinds of customized things like this for people, and they enjoy it when it's customized and it's about them and it's about the team. And it really helps us in building trust, and they're kind of fun and educational at the same time. Everything has to be customized now. Everything has to be relevant for that team. The lesson I've learned here is that activities have to be planned and thought out. Takes some research to do this. I had to think about SBDC for that bingo card and understand, what SBDC folks could have in common. So it has to be planned and thought out. You don't do these things randomly. You really got to think about them before you go forward. Test it out maybe on one person if you can. All right, debate. Remember last week we talked about productive conflict. So here's an idea for an activity to help your team understand how to have productive conflict. Let's have a debate. The goal here is to practice handling disagreements by teaching how to engage in productive conflict. So we'll demonstrate techniques to resolve conflict, whether it's interpersonal or even organizational, and to differentiate between, what's healthy conflict and what's not. So here's how we do it. We pick an issue that's not too hot, all right? Because we don't want it to go nuts on us here. So an issue that's not too hot, we assign sides. You're going to be the pro side, you're going to be the con side. Let everybody, go into a group and work out their arguments, then let them come back. And what I would suggest is you Google the rules for a formal debate and modify them to meet your purpose. Just do kind of a formal debate. There's lots of information on that because formal debate is something that we use in college and high schools all over, even though we don't call it debate now. When we get into organizations, we call it conflict, which, interesting, right? And then you debrief it. Okay, so an example of this, where I use this very effectively. Jennifer mentioned in my bio that one of the things I teach is a certified public manager course. And in that course, we talk about employee evaluation. And boy, everybody has an opinion on employee evaluation. A lot of people think it's just an awful system, and there's no reason why we should have a formal system. It's just an awful thing. And other people think, well, we absolutely have to have it. So what I do is I say, who thinks we should do away with our evaluation system? And people will raise their hands, and I say, you guys go over there. How many of you think it's important to have a formal appraisal system? Well, I do. You guys go over there. So you're pro, you're con, and I'm going to give you 15 minutes to prepare your arguments, and then you're going to come back and argue this. Whenever they do this, every time, all the awful stuff about appraisal system comes to the surface, and people end up leaving after they've had this debate saying, yeah, there's a lot of this that isn't good, but there's a lot of ways I could make this better. And that's what they learn from it, because they've had this productive conflict where they have ideas about, yeah, this is what I don't like, but this is what I could do about it. And it works every time. Same kind of thing for you. Just pick an issue or maybe a problem that you're looking at. What are the pros and cons of this solution? And you can assign it randomly. You don't even have to say who wants to do it this way and who wants to do it that. You can just assign it randomly, however you want, but give them the rules of a formal debate. Let them come back and have a debate. And you'll just be amazed at how much information will be on the table. Plus, it's fun. They enjoy it. Here's another idea on this one, a secret rebel. This is to prevent groupthink, resulting in better decisions. So this is easy. You just secretly appoint one team member to be the dissenter, and you explain your expectation privately to the individual. Whenever the team is all feeling good about their decision, I want you to come up with some reason why this isn't a good idea. At the meeting's end, you call them out and thank them for doing a great job for being a dissenter. And everybody's like, what? Of course, after you've done this a couple of times, they'll expect that somebody's being the dissenter, right? Rotate the task to another member the next time. But what it does is it challenges your team to try to think of things from different sides and gives somebody a responsibility and a right to actually call out some things that they think aren't right about this. Really works well, and they kind of have some fun with it at the same time. Helps us with that brainstorming process to think differently. The lesson learned here is employees may get a little too into a forced role. Sometimes I have had this go a little wrong because some people get a little crazy with it. And as the facilitator, sometimes you have to call it back. So yeah, I confess, sometimes people get a little crazy, but it can be a really impactful activity. If you're a good facilitator and can call them back when they get too crazy. All right, consensus. Ensure every team member is committed to agreed action step. I talked about this last time, so you got this one. This whole activity of consensus. You're going to test consensus. And we went through this last time. You review the final choice, you summarize the agreements, you ask for final thoughts, and then you go one person at a time to ask them if they can support the decision after you leave the room. This is a really easy activity. It's a really essential activity whenever you're making a decision, something that you can put into practice right now. The lesson here is, though, there are times when the team leader has to gently force participation. And that happens with consensus. This is when you're going around the room calling on each person individually to ask for their support. Sometimes you have to call people out. You have people on your team who will not quickly volunteer their opinion. Here's the thing. Usually those people that are kind of quiet and hesitant to do that still have an opinion. If you can believe it, they have an opinion. They're just not as likely to voice it unless they're specifically asked. If you specifically ask them, they'll usually come forward with their opinion. If you don't specifically ask them, they'll usually build resentment because nobody cares what they think. It's true. Even though you gave them an opportunity, you said, anybody have any opinions, anything they want to talk about? Nobody said anything. They didn't say anything, but you didn't ask me. So sometimes you have to gently force participation. Create a rally cry. This is number 7. I like this one. This is about harnessing and focusing energy on achieving results. This is a great activity. What's a rally cry? It's almost like a team cheer. When you have a new decision or a new goal that everybody's agreed to do, you're all committed to it. We want some kind of a cheer, something that gets people excited. Here's how you do it. You review your goals and choose the most important goal. Now, this is an important activity within itself. What's the main thing? What's the main thing that we should be working on? What's the main thing we should be focusing on? Do you even know? Because what I find is when I go into teams and I go from person to person and I say, hey, what's the main thing that you guys are working on right now? What's like the most important goal? What's the main thing? I get different answers from different team members. You can see how dangerous that is. But sometimes we don't stop to think that maybe not everybody is even on the same page with what's most important right now. So that's the first thing. Let's make sure that we understand what the main thing is and that everybody's focused on the main thing. And this really helps with that because we're all focused on this main thing. We're going to create this rally cry. We're going to brainstorm some catchy phrases that will serve to define the goals and motivate team members. We're going to come to consensus on what that rally cry is, and then we're going to use it over and over again because it's catchy and people like it. I had one team who had set a goal. It was they had to fundraise and they had to raise, I think it was $200,000 in 6 months, something like that. Their phrase was just something like 206, but everybody knew that meant 200,000 in 6 months. It could be that simple. But I want to tell you a story about my favorite one that I wish so much I had a recording of, but I don't. But this was awesome. So I was talking to people about creating a rally cry for their team and how to do it at a session I was doing. And I was explaining how beneficial it can be. And I had one leader, and it was a healthcare industry. It was a big hospital system where there were several campuses of this hospital system. And I had one leader who kind of timidly raised her hand, and all of her staff were there. There were probably 100 people in the room. And she raised her hand. She said, my team already has a rally cry. I said, yeah, that's amazing. I'm so happy to hear that. That's cool. Tell us what it is. She said, I don't think anybody here would understand it. So, I'd rather not. And I said, oh, come on. We'd love to hear it. She said, no, I promise you, you won't know what it means. I said, well, if you would share it, we'd really love to hear it. And she said, okay, I'll tell you what it is, but I know you're not going to understand it. Okay, we got it. Tell us your rally cry. Here's why I wish I had a recording. When she told us her rally cry, I am serious. You could point to the people in her team. You could point in the room of 100 people. You could point to the specific members of her team, because when she said it, there was physical change in these people. I'm serious. I'm not making this up. I mean, they sat up straighter. Their chin goes up. They were so proud of this. They were so proud of this rally cry. It's like, this is my rally cry. They're smiling. I'm like, whoa. And everybody in the room felt it. It was crazy. So her rally cry, you want to know what, I know you want to know what the rally cry was, even though you won't understand it, right? So she said, our rally cry is, we are the mothership. And I'm like, okay, you're right. We don't really know what it means. Will you explain it? Somebody across the room who wasn't on her team raised her hand and said, I know exactly what she means. Like, do you? She said, yeah, I think I do. I want to take a stab at it. So, okay, go for it. She said, that team, they work in a 100-year-old hospital. My team works in a 10-year-old building. We're constantly amazed at their performance because they, we have these pneumatic tubes that send our pharmaceuticals up to the floor where our patients are. They have to go to the basement and get them. We have all these modern conveniences. We have internet everywhere. In their building, they haven't been able to get internet everywhere. They have places where there's absolutely no Wi-Fi. We can't believe how great of a job they do considering the limitations they have because of the age of their building. And I said to the leader, I said, does that have anything to do with it? She said, actually, that's it exactly. She said, we were the first. We were the first building of this hospital system. We were first. And yes, our building's over 100 years old and we have a lot of challenges, but if it weren't for us, none of these other buildings would be here. None of the rest of this system would exist. We are the mothership. Isn't that cool? And one of the members of our team, I asked them, I said, so members of the team, like, I saw you guys change when she said that. So tell me something, like, does this mean anything to you? Is this something you hear often? And a couple of them raised their hands, and this one said, I can be having a really bad day, the worst day. And one of my team members will come up to me and say, hey, we are the mothership. And it changes everything for me because I'm so proud of what we accomplish. And it was a great story. It's amazing. But that's what a rally cry can do. It's like everybody's on the same page, everybody's working on the same thing, and everybody's really proud of what they're accomplishing. Isn't that cool? So you can do that. And wouldn't that be a fun team activity? And here's the other thing, just know that it might change because if you accomplish that 206, now you've got a new goal, right? So you need a new rally cry, but it's a really fun process to go through with your team of doing that rally cry. And Jennifer, it's usually under 10 words. I just want you to know. Lesson learned here, some level of chaos can produce great results. So usually when you're doing this rally cry, it gets a little chaotic, it gets a little crazy. It's really fun. So I would really recommend that for your team. And it's just really helpful that that everybody's thinking in the same direction, that we're all working on the same thing. Really great. All right, here's number 8. Do more, do less, and stop. I think it's possible that some of you have done this in some way before, but I like this one because this was a major change for me when I learned to do this, and I found out some really interesting stuff, which I'll share with you. But the goal here is to check in on perceived job tasks and priorities. We're so busy with day-to-day work that sometimes we don't take time just to kind of look at a review of what are we doing and why. We just do things because this is the way we've always done it. And maybe it's not even relevant anymore. So this is an activity that you do with the team where you put up 3 charts of flip chart paper and you give them markers and you just let them go crazy. No structure here, chaotic, it'll be great. Just put the charts up, tell them just to go to chart and write whatever they want. What do you think we should do more of? What do you think we should do less of? And what do you think we should stop? Are there things that we're doing that we should just stop? So I did this with my team at one point. And on the stop page, there was something that was absolutely ridiculous. I mean, come on, people. They said we should stop doing monthly reports. Now, I had 15 supervisors doing a monthly report that went to headquarters every month. It took them a full day to do the monthly report. So I'm sure they wanted to stop, but get real. The monthly report, we've always done the monthly report. We send it to headquarters. We don't have control over that. We have to do this report. It was awful, but this is what we do. And they're telling us to stop. But I decided to explore it after hearing their side. So I called headquarters and I said, it's been brought to my attention that this report is really very cumbersome. And I'm wondering if we could, streamline it or do something to help ourselves. And so I'm wondering, first of all, what happens to the monthly report when you receive them? And the person I was talking to at headquarters said, well, we put them in a filing cabinet. We have a filing cabinet over here. This is when we're doing them all on paper. Yeah. We put them in this filing cabinet, and we have them all right here in our office. We have all the reports. I said, okay, that's cool. But what do you do with it? Well, we file it. We keep it here, so that we have that data. Okay, but what do you do with it? I mean, like, what do you do with the data? And continues just to go over their head, like, well, we file it. I'm like, wait, is this what's going on with this thing? So I decided to try an experiment because I was a very brave leader who didn't fear being fired. I told my supervisors to not submit their report. I told them to do it, but don't submit it. Do it. We'll have it ready. And when headquarters notice that we didn't send it, they'll call us and we'll send it right away. Oh my goodness, we forgot to send that. We're sorry. But they didn't call. We didn't send it. They didn't call. 15 teams are doing this report, right? A full day every month. They didn't call. Second month, we did the same thing. They didn't call. Like, why are we doing this? So I went and had a big meeting with everybody to figure out what was going on. And what I found out was that the data that they needed was being captured digitally. There was no reason to send this report in. It was just something we had always done. And guess what? We stopped doing monthly reports just because one person had the guts to write that on this chart to say, let's stop. You know how much money we saved and how much effort we saved in stopping to do these hideous reports that were being placed in a file and nobody even knew they were missing. Isn't that crazy? So this is a really fun activity because it's surprising sometimes what you learn when you just allow people to free flow and tell you what they think we should do more of. We've only done this a little bit, but this is really making a big difference in the number of applicants we have. We should do more LinkedIn job ads, or whatever. Let's do less. We've been doing this over and over and getting absolutely no results. Why are we doing this? Maybe we don't have to do that as much as we do it, or maybe we can stop it completely. So this is a great activity to try with your team to really improve performance. The lesson learned from this one is clear instructions and rules must be shared. When you set them up for this, don't set them up for failure. Don't set them up for failure by saying, well, let's see. I think we should do more luncheons, or I think we should give more rewards. We should give more of those $100 rewards to our employees, and we don't have $100 to give them more. We should do less. I mean, let's not set them up for something that we absolutely can't do. So sometimes you have to set clear expectations of what you mean by this. And even though I say that with a little bit of hesitation, because if anybody had asked me if monthly reports could be stopped, I would have said, are you crazy? We can't stop that. But somebody wrote it up there and we explored it and found out, wow, so yeah. But just share clear instructions and rules if you have things in place that have to be there. All right, number 9, 2 more to go. Looking at individual problems. Oh, I love this one too. To help individual team members with problems that are impacting team results. Here's the thing. A lot of times our employees have problems that's personal to them that they're afraid to admit. They're struggling with things. They're stuck. Individuals are stuck and they need help, but they don't really know how to express it without coming off as being stupid or, someone they don't fully trust is the issue, really. So let's give them a way to maybe get some other solutions to problems that to them may seem unsolvable. And here's a really simple way, really simple activity. Here's what you do. Give them an index card, give each person an index card, and allow everybody in the group to discuss problems that they're struggling with. Just, let them have an open discussion, see what they'll put out. Then ask them to write this problem, a problem that they're struggling with, on an index card. It doesn't have to be one that the group's already talked about. If it didn't come up, that's fine. They can write whatever they want on this card, a problem that they're struggling with. And then we're going to pass it. We're going to pass the problem. we're going to pass it all around the room. So I'm going to pass my card to Jennifer. Jennifer's going to pass her card to Lorna. Lorna's going to pass hers to Shannon. Shannon's going to pass hers to Kristen, and so on. We're going to pass it to the next person. And that person is going to write an idea for solving that problem on the back of the card. Well, here's an idea. You can try this. So just write anything. Then you pass it again. And you keep passing it until eventually you get your own card back with all of these ideas on the back for solving the problem. And maybe the magic one is there. Wouldn't that be amazing? Now you have all these ideas about your problem, and now you debrief. Now you open it up and say, let's talk about the ideas that you got. Does anybody want to ask any questions? And somebody will say something like, one of the ideas on my card is this, like, can I do that? What do you guys think about this? And then you can have a discussion. Great, right? So you get a chance to get some help with personal issues or problems that you might be having in helping the team. Cool, very easy to do, and not something that requires you to put very much on the line, but maybe you'll get some great answers. The lesson learned here is that one missing team member can have a severe impact. And not just on this activity, but in everything that you do. If you have somebody that's consistently missing meetings, and you're missing something big, you're missing a team member who is mutually accountable for results, who's not fully participating. So even one missing member can have a severe impact on your ability to get great results on your team. And that's something to watch out for. Maybe everybody's really into it, but you have one person who's not engaged. You need to work with that person and find out what's going on. It can really impact your team. And the last activity idea I have for you here, in addition to all the ones we've had in other sessions, is I call it Pass the Oscar. And this came to me from a leader that I was working with, and I thought this was brilliant. I loved it. Actually, this came during COVID time. They started doing this during COVID time. The goal here is to simultaneously provide opportunities to identify potential problem areas, have meaningful conversation on specific topics, and then share ideas modeled by others. Here's what it is. This is crazy cool. I love it. So you create a rotating schedule, assigning responsibility to each team member in turn for leading this activity. So we take turns. Maybe you do it once a month, once a week, whatever your team decides to do. The challenge is to find one 5-minute or less video relevant to your work team that they believe is worth discussion. Imagine the possibilities here. I'm asking each one of you to go out there and find a video that's less than 5 minutes that you want to come back and share with the team. And then you have 3 discussion questions ready for use after the video is played. The first thing is, whoever is assigned, think of all the learning that they're going to do, all the informal learning that they're going to do just in looking for the right video. That right there is golden. And then they're going to come back with something that they think is important to the whole team. Sometimes I've found the leader is very surprised what people come back with because it was not on their radar at all. No idea that this was an issue or something that the team needed to address. Where this one individual went and found this awesome video and brought it back and showed it and said, let's talk about it as a team. Isn't that great? And it gives each team member responsibility, and they can be a little proud of what they bring to the team to share information and help the team advance. Isn't that cool? I love that idea. And it costs nothing at all. Every activity that I've given you costs nothing at all. No special equipment required. Okay, that was cool. The lesson here, any game or activity has to be relevant. And that's the key with that activity and really with everything. Anything that you do has to be relevant to the work. This is not just about doing activities that are fun, fun games, that kind of stuff. If it's not relevant to the work that you're doing, to your team's mission, don't do it. We don't have that kind of time to waste. We don't have that kind of time. So make sure that anything you do is relevant. So there you go. 10 lessons learned the hard way. I hope you can benefit from them, because these are great ways to help your team advance. Questions or discussion?